So we are here today with Sister Lorna Bowan. She's a longtime member of the church from the Kearny Ward. Sister Bowan, thank you for meeting with us. I understand that you came to, well, tell us where you were born and how you got to Kearny.
Well, I was born in what they call Cactus Flats, right south of Safford. But my parents lived in the Gila Valley in New Mexico. They had already moved there from Safford. And she came back to my grandma's for me to be born there. I lived after I was married in Silver City, and our stake was in El Paso. And took us almost 3 hours to go to our state meetings. My husband lost his job, and they had opened a new smelter in Hayden. And so we moved our family down here, right when the town of Kearny was being built. And we went to church in Hayden, in the building that was not finished. We just met in the basement there. And my first calling to the church was primary chorister. And I told them, I don't have much musical knowledge, but I got a lot of enthusiasm. And that was a very different calling for me, but I was thankful to have a place where I could serve the Lord.
So tell us a little bit about, soon after you moved here, within the next couple of years, they actually finished the building in Hayden. Is that right?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, it was a beautiful building, and we were very happy to have the building there. And I do not remember how many years it was before before the Kearny building was built. I know that it was 6 or 8 years before they started the Kearny building, maybe even longer. I don't have the dates on that.
Now, you and your husband were sealed after you moved to Kearny, correct?
Yes.
How did that come about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, while we still lived in Silver City, the stake missionaries was visiting part member families, and they came to we had 2 children at the time, and they visited us and taught Bill the lessons. He did quit smoking at that time, but the surprising part was they converted me instead of him. And I told my mom, I can't believe it. Every single thing they teach, it just goes to my heart. I just know that it's true. And she said, that's because you've always known that it was true. I was raised in a really small branch, and we met in one room, just a wooden building with one room. We had no running water. We went next door to the Catholic Church to get a bucket of water for sacrament, and we all drank out of the dipper. And we had the block long before the block started. Because we were scattered, we had all of our meetings in a row, and so sometimes we were there till 1 or 2 o'clock. We sat on wooden benches with no backs. And I went to church every single Sunday, but I guess I didn't learn very much. I don't know. I always believed the church was true. I knew it was true, but I was not converted to living it, obviously, because I had married out of the church. And when they came to teach those lessons, it was just like my light bulb moment. And I knew that all this was true. I knew that this was God's plan of happiness for us. And when we moved down here, the missionaries came again and taught my husband. He was baptized in some springs out in Dudleyville. And a year later, we went to the temple with all we had 4 children at the time, and they were all sealed to us.
Now, in those early days, the Globe Stake didn't exist yet, and so I believe you were part of the Tucson Stake.
First we were in Tucson Stake, then we were in North Tucson Stake for a couple of 3 years before Globe Stake was organized.
What was it like when you heard, or when the Globe Stake was created? Because you were going to be moving from the Tucson Stake, or Tucson North Stake, traveling to Tucson to going all the way up to Globe. What was that like?
Well, we were really excited to have a stake that was closer and that we kind of could call our own. I'd never lived. When I was growing up, Mount Graham was our stake, and we had High Council visitors once a month, but that was the extent of what I knew about the stake. So this was really, I can remember, wasn't it President Cecil, wasn't he the first? President Cecil and President Covey, I remember very, very clearly, and was very close to them, but I'm sorry I don't remember this other counselor that was there.
So, after the stake was created, it wasn't that much, longer after that plans were made to build a stake center up in Globe. How did that affect you here in Kearny with the building of the stake center in Globe?
Well, I think every family in the stake was assessed money that they should pay into the stake building, because at that time the members were paying a percentage of the building cost, and so we had an assessment and we paid that assessment. And then for some reason, I don't know whether the cost of material went up, but before the building was finished, they ran out of money and they needed us to give an additional amount to help finish the building. My husband was a little reluctant to do this, and so I just got the idea and I said, well, we have a little business. We had Buzzies by then here in Kearny, and I knew how much that we made every week, grossed every week on an average. So I picked a figure quite a bit higher than that, like, I don't know if it was $500, but I said, well, every week that we make $500 more than we're making now, will you pay $100 towards this assessment? And he said, well, yeah, that's easy. Of course I will. And from the very first week, the Lord blessed us and we grossed that amount and we paid the second assessment.
So, when the building was dedicated, did that have, was that neat? Did you feel like you were a part of that because of those assessments and the efforts that you made?
Well, it's a beautiful building, and I think all of us in the stake were very, very proud of that building and proud of the part that we had played in it. I hear some people say, well, look, I bought those blocks, but it's, I think when we sacrifice, we appreciate things more.
Have there been any particular stake activities or functions over the years that bring any strong memories back to you?
Well, I served, and I looked and I couldn't find the years, but I served with Sister Sylvia Campbell and Lael Taylor, and I was the other counselor in the Stake Relief Society for 2 or 3 years. And at that time, I was trying to remember if we met every month or if we met every quarter, but we would go and sometimes, most of the time, we went to Miami for the meetings, and we had a general Relief Society meeting, and they broke up into groups, and all the teachers got instruction, and we got instruction, and it was a very special time for me. That's the only stake calling that I had in the years that I've been a member. But I loved that calling, and I loved those sisters, and I felt that we worked well together, that our talents really, each one of our talents really helped build the others.
Now, when you're serving in that capacity, and just generally speaking, as you've gone to stake activities, has it ever been a challenge, just the distance to get to either Miami or to Globe? How have you dealt with that, the traveling and things like that?
Well, that's just a given. There isn't any location. I mean, all of my life, I've never lived in a city. And so we always traveled. I just felt this was the closest stake that I had in my life. I mean, like I said, we were in El Paso stake when I lived in Silver City, and so it's just a blessing to. There's something about meeting as a bigger group to help you know that you're a part of something much bigger than just your own ward. And there's strength there in meeting as a stake and seeing the dedication of this many more people to the same cause that you have dedicated your life.
Now, Sister Bowan, I think it's well known that you have a great appreciation for, love for the Book of Mormon. And can you tell us a little bit about that? And in particular, I'm wondering if you can share with us what you've done to help share the Book of Mormon with your children and grandchildren.
Well, my son went to 6 years of seminary, 1 year of BYU, and then went totally inactive for 40 years. I guess he was like I was. I guess he knew the gospel was true, but he wasn't converted to living it. And every so often I would give him a Book of Mormon, and then I would ask him, did you read the book? And he would say, no. And I would say, Mike, read the book. And then I would tell him, I have a promise from the Lord. Train up a child in the way he shall go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. How old do you have to get? And he would laugh. And this went on for 40 years with me. And so finally, he went to Saudi Arabia, and I couldn't call him. And so he got me a computer so that I could email him. And I emailed him every day. And after he had come back to the States, he was in Indiana, and I said, Mike, if I write the Book of Mormon for you, will you read it? On email. And he didn't answer. And so I took that for a yes, and I started writing the Book of Mormon. I started with the fly page and do the introduction and the Joseph Smith story before I start. But I'm sorry to say that I skipped Isaiah chapters. But the rest of it I wrote in longhand, and I would spend 45 minutes to an hour every day writing the Book of Mormon for him. And when I finished the first book, it was a month, I sent it to him and telling him that if he would read it, By the time he read it, I would have his second book ready. I went to visit him later in the year, the next year, and I said, "Did you read the book?" And he said, "No, it's not the right time in my life." I said, "Okay." And he left home to work in Tennessee, and there he got involved. He went to church. He said, "I've been to the cannery." And I said, "How do you know about the cannery?" And he said, "Well, I saw it in the bulletin." "And how do you know about the bulletin?" So I knew he had gone to church. He went back home to Indiana, started his repentance process, and in 1 year, he was ready to go to the temple. My second daughter, my first daughter, saw the book and she said, "Mom, I have to have one." And so I wrote it for her. She passed away this last June, but that was the Book of Mormon that she read every single day, was the one that I had written for her. I wrote it for each one of my children. I have one daughter that is not active, and I did not give her her book. It's still at my house, and I don't want her to have it until I'm gone, because that's the only way I think she'll appreciate it. But I wrote it for 3 or 4 grandchildren, plus my six children. And then I saw I couldn't do this for all my grandkids. I have 30 grandchildren and 54 great-grandchildren and 10 great-great-grandchildren. And so I started writing just 1 month in the books that I prepared for them. And they got it wherever it was. But I always wrote a letter telling them that if they would read this book for 30 days, prayerfully and with real intent, really wanting to know, they would know that it was true. I feel it's just, the Book of Mormon has blessed my life every day. It still continues to bless my life every day. I now write a letter to about 50 people, some inactive, some non-members. And every morning I share some truths from the chapter that I read this morning. And now I don't skip the Isaiah chapters, but I only include what I see in them. I find a good thought in them, and I write that down. And every time I read it, I learn a little more. But I didn't want them to get bogged down. I want them to learn to love the Book of Mormon as I love the Book of Mormon.
Was there anything else you'd like to share with us as we are celebrating this year the 50th anniversary of the Globe Arizona Stake? And so is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, I've lived a long time, and I have lived my life without the gospel. I have lived it halfway within the gospel, and I've lived it fully in the gospel. And I know that it is truly the plan of happiness, that's where I find happiness and joy, is in the gospel of Jesus Christ and in the church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the service that we can give each other, the growth that we can obtain there by serving one another.
As I've been interviewing people, I've been asking if they'd like to finish with their testimonies. I think we've heard a lot of your testimony, but is there anything you'd like to add to your testimony?
Well, I know that God lives. And I know that Jesus Christ is my Savior. And I know that if I hadn't had second chances and third chances, that I would be totally lost. And I am so grateful to Him for the principle of repentance and the chance to try again. And to try until we get it right. I'm just so grateful for Him and His grace and mercy that He offers to each one of us.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a delight hearing your stories, and thank you for your great example.